Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Golden Boots podcast. This is your host, Jorge Gonzalez. Our podcast is all about soccer, all things soccer. We love soccer. For episode 13 today, we have Caleb Adams. Caleb runs Regal Soccer. He's currently in Costa Rica, so I'm pretty jealous right now. How are you today, man?
Man, I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, man. The little pre-chat that we just had before this was awesome, man. So just getting to know you, getting to know people in the soccer world, that's what I'm about.
Especially, man, especially in Charlotte area. I mean, nothing's more special than being able to talk to people from your own state, home state, talking about, and even home city in many cases, talk about soccer. Like, it's a good time. It's always good.
It's a very good time, man. So our podcast, we like to bring on different players, different people from the community that actually know a lot about soccer. I know you and I have kind of been getting to know each other just through Twitter and all these other social media platforms, and I really like your mindset, man. I like what you know. I've looked into a little bit about some of the things that you're doing. You have a podcast on Spotify and other things, and so just tell us a little bit about yourself, man, and introduce yourself.
Definitely. So, like you said, my name is Caleb Adams. My name is a bit deceiving, considering my background, because it's a very American-sounding name. But I did grow up in a multicultural home. My mom is Costa Rican, my dad's American, and so I did grow up within the Latino culture as well as the American culture. Complete opposites in many cases.
100%.
But it was definitely something that I value a lot because it helped me be a lot more open-minded for sure in life. I get along with everybody. In school, I was one of those guys in high school or in college, whatever, that I got along with everybody. I didn't really have many cliques. I hung out with people. I hung out with all different types of people, different backgrounds, but just because that's how I was raised.
Nice.
I mean, I constantly had friends from all over. So, currently I'm in Costa Rica right now. My dad's also down here as well. I didn't mention that to you earlier, but he's also down here, which is kind of funny because he's the American living in Costa Rica, and my mom's a Costa Rican, but she lives in the U.S.
They just swapped.
They did a little swap. I got into soccer actually really late. I actually came into soccer really late. When people talk to me, they're like, "Man, you're so passionate about it, and you've been like doing it your whole life," but not at all. I actually first got into soccer when I was around 15 years old. 16. And I was really into basketball before. Are you familiar with AAU?
I am, a little bit.
I played AAU basketball for a majority of my middle school years and young life. And played it competitively and went to a bunch of tournaments around the country and all that, playing basketball.
Dang, bro, you do a little bit of everything then, man.
I try. So that was really my main thing. I was like dedicated to basketball. But then by the time freshman year in high school came around, everyone had outgrown me by then. Like the dudes that we were playing, like the 15, 14-year-olds that we were playing with at that time, these guys were like 6'4", 6'6", like prospects. And Broughton High School being a big basketball school within North Carolina, there's a lot of competition and all that. And I was like, man, I don't really, I kind of want to try something new. Because, I mean, like, yeah, I might play, I might be able to play for the high school, whatever. But I didn't really see much. Like, I was pretty tired. I was pretty burnt out at that point, Because when I was younger, since I was 11 years old, I trained 3 times a week, going to basketball training over and over and over again. And it was my life, and I'm really thankful for it because it shaped who I am. It made me disciplined. It made me realize the importance of hard work. But at that point, I was just burned out, and I was like, you know what? And that was when the FIFA 2014 World Cup happened.
Okay.
And I watched it, and I got like a massive surge of like this, interest for soccer. And I actually watched the World Cup, the 2014 World Cup. I actually watched it. I actually watched it in Nicaragua.
Wow.
That's where I actually watched it. Yeah, I was doing some missions work down there, and they managed to get like a little small TV.
Was there a team that grew on you? I mean, outside of the U.S., of course, but like that grew on you.
Actually, so after that World Cup, I started playing FIFA. I had been playing 2K my whole life, and this is I feel like this is a very common story for Americans getting into soccer through World Cups and then FIFA. I mean, I know a lot of my friends were basketball guys too, but love soccer now because they started playing FIFA. So I started playing FIFA, and then I got into soccer, and I'm like, man, I'm going to try out for my JV team in high school. screw it. Like, if I don't make it, I have nothing to lose. Like, I've never played, right? I've never played, but I made the team.
Nice.
And just because of athleticism. In JV, high school, if you're fast, then you're probably gonna make it.
At my high school, as long as you wanted to play, we barely had players, bro.
Oh wow. No, like Broughton. While I was there, Broughton actually reached the state finals. Like, Broughton's a really big soccer school.
Dang, okay. So
there's a lot.
So they're big soccer and basketball school then, huh?
Yeah. Basketball, soccer, and lacrosse. Like, that's what they're really good at.
Okay.
We actually had this guy in my senior year of high school playing soccer. We had this one dude. His name was Edson. He's probably, some of your viewers might even know him, but he was actually playing for the. He was invited to West Ham for their academy for a tryout in summer, and then eventually switched over to Atlanta United and played with their academy. But
that's awesome.
He had a bad attitude, man. He was just super cocky. He didn't want to hear it from anybody. He's one of those guys that's like, I'm good, like whatever. And so he messed around, got in trouble, and got kicked out of Atlanta. So guys like that, I'm like, man, like if I were in their position, I would have, done everything in my hands to do that. My possibly could have done to make the most of it. But back to your question. So I was looking for a Prem team that I wanted to support because I had never supported anyone. In the first game I watched, it was a 2013-14 season, and it was I believe it was 2013-14, but it was Swansea City versus Manchester United. Swansea won that game 2-1. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to pull for Swansea. So I became a Swansea City fan. And I enjoyed it because, I wasn't so naive. And I knew enough about soccer at Manchester United where, a good team is recognized and all that. But Swansea City had a really fun playing style. And I always liked pulling for underdogs.
Okay.
They had a really great playing style at that time.
Is that the season they had Michu?
No, that was the year before. He had just left.
Okay.
That was 2012. Yeah, gotcha. Almost. But that was the year we had Sigurdsson, Ki Sung Young, Boney, Wilfred Boney.
Yeah.
And so it was still a really good squad. It was that squad that finished 8th place, I believe, a couple years later.
Okay.
But I love the way they played. They played really, at that time, Swansea played possession soccer. They played a very La Liga style football, but in the Prem, and being a team that wasn't, one of the big boys. Swansea City were my team for sure. And they got relegated, and I supported them ever since. So here I am, just praying they still get, promoted. Still watching them. So I watch a lot of Championship, and yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's cool, man. So tell us a little bit about Regal Soccer, man. And so what made you start it up? What kind of made you make that push to let me try doing this?
Well, with a dream of mine, I've been watching MLS pretty much just as long as I've been watching the Prem, 2013-14, around there. Immediately got into MLS. Thierry Henry at the time was around there, and a couple other decent players. But the MLS was it was getting more fun to watch at that time. It still wasn't at the level it is now. But I've been watching MLS for 6 years now, hardcore. And it had been a dream of mine to have a team from North Carolina, be represented in MLS. I have been praying for it, And ideally, and the thing is, North Carolina is a very big soccer state. We have a big, whether it's on collegiate level. I'm sure you're familiar with Buzio at Sporting Kansas City, Gianluca Buzio.
Yes.
The young guy. He's from Greensboro. And so fun fact, yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that.
So he's not even from Kansas. He's a Carolina boy, baby.
Nice.
But yeah, Gianluca Buzio, he's from Greensboro. And we have a really big soccer state. If you see on the youth levels for the national teams, there's at least one player from North Carolina on every one of those teams.
Yeah.
Many of them, 3 of them. And so, North Carolina produces the talent. And we had the Carolina Railhawks at the time, and they were cool to watch and all that. But at the time, the Carolina Railhawks didn't have an owner ambitious enough to try and make that leap to MLS, which is kind of the downfall thing for Raleigh. Raleigh could have easily had the MLS bid if they just acted sooner. Yeah. But they didn't have a David Tepper at the helm at the time. They didn't have someone who looked big. So
a lot of people that know the MLS, because I know of it, I know a little bit of it. It wasn't a league that I was consumed by the way I am with the Prem.
Right.
But everyone says that. They said Raleigh was kind of primed for it, and with David Tepper's backing, he just came in and man, he just took action.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the main thing. And the thing is, unfortunately, it was money. Even though the Railhawks were a very competitive team with a lot of talent. They had the infrastructure already. They have the legacy. They've been around just as long as many of the original MLS teams, you know?
Yeah.
So Raleigh had, every single advantage going into this MLS bid, but they didn't have somebody ambitious enough. I always forget his name, but the current owner for NCFC, now the Railhawks are now NCFC, North Carolina Football Club. The current owner, when he came in, he brought in that kind of passion. He had that drive, like, we need to take this to the next level.
Yeah.
Like, we got to take this to the next level. And then that's when Triangle, I don't know how familiar you are with Raleigh soccer, but there's Castle and Triangle were the two biggest soccer academies, soccer youth programs within the.
I'm not too familiar, but yeah, continue.
So within Wake County, Triangle and Castle were big producers of players. A lot of youth players, youth teams played through there. They're very competitive teams. But what the owner for the NCFC did, I always forget his name, but what he did is he actually merged he actually merged Triangle and Castle together to make the NCFC Academy.
Okay.
So these are two rival academies that were merged together, and all the best players in North Carolina play for Triangle and Castle at the time. Okay. So this was huge, and this was just a few years back, and this was all for the MLS bid. This is before Charlotte was even rumored, or even had a chance. So he combined these two programs to make NCFC Academy, which then created the biggest academy within the United States. So the biggest single entity of an academy of a team, in this case a USL team, was the NCFC Academy, which was a combination of these two massive youth systems, which I played at Triangle.
Okay.
So that happened, and I was excited because I'm like, okay, all right, because academies are really important for the MLS. That's something that they look into teams and looking for stuff. And so I'm like, okay, so this guy was ambitious. He wanted to do it. He was getting stuff done. This is the difference between him and Tepper, though.
Uh-huh.
Tepper has money. That's it. That's what it came down to, unfortunately. We had the academy. We had the infrastructure. We had the plan. We actually had a plan to build a specific soccer stadium within downtown Raleigh. That was approved. But Tepper had the money, so Charlotte got it.
I'm kind of glad that we got it because I live in Charlotte.
Yeah, of course. I was heated. I'm like, you got to be kidding. I found out. It was really mixed emotions.
Yeah.
It was really mixed. I was like, because I had a connection to Charlotte too. I've gone to Charlotte my whole life as well. I've gone to the Panthers games. I went to school there. So I was like, this is in North Carolina, whatever. I was like, man. But anyways, kind of circling around to the question of why I started Regal Soccer was because we finally have this team in the Carolinas. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be like you. I wanted to be at the forefront of it. I wanted to have some sort of influence within the soccer community in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And I knew that, I could have started with the NCFC and Charlotte Independence, and I actually plan on also making content for them as well. Cool. Regal Soccer is going to be based on North Carolina soccer. My plan with Regal Soccer is it's a place to bring in-depth analysis to North Carolina soccer, the Carolina soccer, not North Carolina, but South Carolina too. And I want it to be a hub and a spot that if you want to know about players within the North Carolinas or within the Carolinas, that's a place to go look at it. You're like, man, I know about this young guy who plays at some random club in South Carolina, but everyone's hyping him up. I don't know anything about him. Well, that's where I come in. I want to inform you on that. I want to educate you on that. So the whole idea of Regal Soccer is to provide the Carolinas a place to find in-depth analysis of their teams and players of the Carolinas.
I love that, man.
Well. Yeah, man. As well with additional coverage of MLS and United States men's national team, of course. Of course, I want to be doing that as well, but primarily Carolina soccer. Like that's what Regal Soccer is about, and bringing in, educating and informing people in the Carolinas and the whole country, and possibly the world about the football going on in the Carolinas. So.
Yeah, and you're right. I don't think anyone's doing anything like you are in terms of this area, and
no.
From us talking for what I've seen recently too. Like we're in the cities around here, just soccer cities, like you just mentioned, man. And I mean, like there's certain spots in the world that I can think of, I think Arsene Wenger once did an interview and he talked about like if you're looking for talented players in France, you're gonna go to Paris and come to the outskirts. If you're looking at Brazil, you're going to Sao Paulo. And I'm like,
Exactly.
that could kind of be, if you're looking for amazing talent in the U.S., you're looking in the Charlotte area, the Raleigh,
Oh
the
yeah,
Greensboro, so.
definitely. I mean, like I said, we just have the history of players, and we were on soccer way before the rest of the country was.
Yeah.
That we've been on soccer for a long time, and the talent is here. I mean, there are very few places that I've been to in the U.S. I've been to many states, but at least in Raleigh, in Raleigh, there are soccer fields everywhere, man. Everywhere.
Yeah.
Every single neighborhood has one. Every single county region has one, and plenty of them.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I mean, and when I'm in Raleigh and even Charlotte, I'm playing pickup 3 to 4 times a week. That's special, dude. This like pickup game is where the stars are born. This pickup game is where Neymar and Messi all came from. It's a bit different because these guys are fighting for their lives.
Yeah.
Unlike a lot of the poorest people in the U.S. have more money than some of the middle class people in these other countries.
Yeah, bro.
That's a sad reality.
Yeah, I think I read a stat that like if you make over $30,000 a year, then you're in the top 1% of the world. Which just lets you know like the financial 100%. Status of the world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Even if your parents own like a little if your parents own like a dry cleaners or a nail salon, they're making more money than most people in the world are. Yeah. If they're in the States. But that doesn't change the fact that there are people still struggling in the U.S. 100%. And within North Carolina, South Carolina especially. Yeah. There's definitely people still struggling. And me being, half Hispanic, I have a lot of Hispanic friends. And I would go to their houses and it would be like 8, 10 people all in one tiny little house. And it was shocking to me, And so it unlike a lot of the
perspective, right?
Oh, 100%. A lot of I am well aware of the struggles of all people, Hispanic, Latino, Black, white, everybody, Asians, everyone. Because I had a lot of friends and I was exposed to it very early on. I would always go pick up my friends because they didn't have cars, so I had to pick them up for the games and stuff like that. So I'll go to their neighborhoods, South Raleigh, and they had these tiny little houses with 8, 10 people in one place. For me, anything I could do to help them out, I would. I would pay for their food after the game. I'll give them some cash for some, for the next day. I would do whatever I can because I was blessed in my upbringing.
That's awesome, bro.
I lived in North Raleigh, so a lot of North Raleigh kids. If you're not familiar with Raleigh, North Raleigh is like the richer area.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of this belt line that goes around Raleigh that connects all of the like Cary, Raleigh, Durham. And people who live within that belt line usually have more money.
Yeah.
And while people outside of that are like middle class to lower class. So most people within that inside the belt line are really kind of hidden to the realities of the world.
Yeah.
A lot of them just kind of grow up in these really nice neighborhoods with their rich friends and don't know anything about what's going on outside of, not even that far away, man. It's like 10 minutes away. It's completely different.
That's the one thing I love about soccer, man. It doesn't matter your race, your religion, your financial status. Like, it's a sport that anyone can grow in love and anyone can grow in. So,
exactly, man. And so, for me, like, seeing that, I also saw, too, the soccer side of that. These guys, they're like, for them, soccer, getting a college scholarship for soccer is their only way out.
Yeah.
It's either that or they either go into the construction business or they go into manual labor where they're probably getting underpaid. And it's a rough life. It's a rough life. I have a lot of friends who have kids already. I play soccer with them, have kids, but have to support not only their kid, but their family. And these are guys my age, our age, who are just, working their butts off, just to stay in the game, just to survive.
Yeah.
So, seeing that perspective, because of my upbringing and stuff, being exposed to it, has definitely not only shown me the reality of the world, shown me how blessed that I am and made me more grateful, but as well shown me that, man, these kids can ball.
Yeah,
they got some dirty players, man.
Nice.
Like,
so speaking about like kids that can ball and things of that nature, one of the things that we see that European teams establish that I'm kind of starting to notice more here in the MLS is those youth academies, the U15, U17, U20s, that the purpose of those academies are designed to feed players to the first team, right?
Right.
La Masia in Barcelona had, I want to say from the period of like 2004 to 2011, just amazing players come out like Messi,
Oh yeah,
Fabregas, Piqué, Xavi, Iniesta, and I'm not saying we're getting there just yet, but one of the things
right.
I do love is that we're putting heavy focus on that, and I think that's important. And so, what do you think are the things that we can do as a that Charlotte FC can do to kind of
Mm.
create a successful academy?
Yeah, so I have four keys
Mm-hmm.
that I like that I pretty much I think are well, from what I've seen across the world and within the successful academies within MLS,
Mm-hmm.
like FC Dallas, Philadelphia
Yeah.
Union are two of the best right now. Is these four different keys. The first one, and this one is maybe probably the most important, is your players that come into your academy in no way should have to pay for anything.
Mm.
Period. It should never be about how much money your family has, but how good you are. That is the first thing. That is the first key, I think, to any academy. Any academy that requires financial entry, requires some kind of financial incentive or requires some kind of financial entry, that's never going to create a successful academy
100%.
ever, because you're already limiting at least 80% of the possible players within the
I
academy.
know, man. I can think of 8 players in my mind that's had a similar situation where like they played for teams and like because they had financial struggles, like even when they played, the other parents would complain like, "Yo, why is my kid not playing? I'm paying and that kid isn't." But I'm like, "Okay, because the kid's
Yeah.
better than you."
Exactly, and that's a model too. That it's kind of strange because it seems like soccer in the U.S. has been kind of like it's been kind of cornered into this corner of being a niche sport that everyone's going to pay for no matter what.
Yeah.
Because it's so niche, people are very passionate about it. So no matter what, they're going to pay. You know, unlike basketball, football, baseball, which are really mainstream. These are sports where some of the poorest guys in basketball can get into the AAU teams any day because they're good. So that's not really an American thing. Is limiting these the poor people from not being to enter these academies or clubs because of money. Because we don't see that in football, basketball, baseball, etc. Or these other sports. We don't see that in those sports. We don't see that in the main sports of the U.S. Top 2, football and basketball.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you come from. There's so many stories in the NBA about players who come from nothing to this point. Jimmy Butler in the final right now, a perfect example. He was homeless, man. He was homeless throughout high school, and not look at him now. But for some reason, soccer's kind of been pushed into like this kind of niche, and not only has that affected academies because they have to pay for academies, it's also affected us as fans. Because if you notice, it is way harder to watch soccer games without paying than it is to watch basketball and football games.
You know what? That's true. You're right.
You know what I'm saying? Not only does it limit our players coming into the academies, et cetera, and as well as the potential and talent within our pool, it also limits us as fans because we're having an exposure of the sport. Because in order to watch soccer games, you probably have to pay something.
Yeah.
There's very few games that you can get that you don't have to pay some kind of subscription service or something for. And so this kind of idea of soccer is this kind of niche thing in the U.S. and then let's just drain all the money out of it because those people are going to pay for it, which we do. I mean, we all pay. I mean, I pay for a buttload of subscriptions for soccer when I was in the U.S. And so that's unfortunate. So this kind of the bigger problem here is the view of soccer within the U.S. And that's affecting this pay-to-play system within the U.S. as well as pay-to-watch system.
Yeah.
So it affects
So that's your number one. Rule number one.
Rule number one is there should be no financial entry. There should be no financial minimum requirements to get into an academy.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is the staff. Because the reality is, if you have guys who aren't qualified, who don't know what they're doing, who are used to working with adults but not youth, it's very different. You could be an amazing, amazing first-team coach, but be absolutely horrific as a youth team coach.
Yeah.
They're completely two different things, two worlds, and they require different strengths and ability to handle people.
What do you think are those strengths?
I think one of the strengths is knowing when to push, but also kind of pull a little bit. So, for example, when you're a professional player, the coach has every single right to demand the most out of you, right? You're getting paid. That's your job. Academy guys aren't guaranteed. This isn't their job. They're doing this they're doing this out of millions of other people trying to get that job.
Yeah.
So with these kids, it's really dangerous to push them too much to the point where their confidence just gets shattered and they can't recover. Yet it's a very fine line. So you have to be able to be encouraging, push them to the limit, but you also have to be forgiving. You have to be understanding, and you have to be very patient because at the end of the day, they're kids. They're mistakes. They make mistakes. They're not
100%.
perfectly tuned out. They're not refined.
Yeah.
And so
You got to
that's the
have
big-
some people skills then, huh?
100%. When it comes to youth, I think it's so much more about people as not even people, it's kid management, kid and teen youth management in terms of one-on-ones
Yeah.
than it is actual ability on the teaching them technical skills. They can learn that. They can learn that anywhere. They can learn how to dribble better. They can learn how to shoot better. They can go on YouTube and do a drill for it. I mean, it's very easy to teach a kid that, but it's very different to have a youth coach who can have that connection with the players and really get the most out of them.
Nice.
That coach has to be capable of bringing the best out of those players. Those players, those youth players, have to be thinking, I will die for this coach. I would do anything to please this coach and my teammates.
Mm.
So having a coach who can kind of get that out of your players is really important.
Nice.
And so, so much youth development is about coaches.
100%.
So much. It's not about facilities. It's not about your specific players. It's about the coaches. It's about the people around them.
So 2 is staff. What's 3?
Number 3 is that they should play their players. Number 3 is they have to play your youth. You have to play your youth. Because the only way you're going to see if your academy is doing anything is throwing some kids out there on the pitch on the first team.
Yeah.
You're seeing this with FC Dallas and Union. It's no coincidence that the 2 best academies in the league also have a minimum 3 to 4, 5, 6 starters from the youth academy. At FC Dallas, even more. But for Philadelphia, 3 of their key players are academy players. And so you have to play your youth because if you're a team that is known for not playing the youth, the best players who are young are not going to want to go to your academy.
Yeah.
They're not going to be driven to work because they say, no matter how hard I'm going to work, I'm not going to be able to join the first team because that's how it is.
I also think that the way the MLS is being structured right now, it's benefiting those youth players as well because we're becoming more of a selling league. So when you're becoming more of a selling league, you're more incentivized to put those players versus I can think of
100%.
Liga MX. It's not really a selling league. They bring in players. So there's more pressure to have the team be successful right off the bat versus trying to invest in younger players. That's why you see a lot of Argentina players from a lot of South American countries come in, and there's a huge problem there because they're not developing their academies or their players coming through the academies the way the MLS is doing now, right?
100%. Definitely. We talked about this earlier, but for the people that don't know, the MLS, this transfer window has exported more players to Europe than any other league in the Americas other than Brazil. More than Argentina, more than Mexico, more than Chile.
Yeah. That's huge.
And that's massive. And I actually read an article recently talking about the Argentinian youth system because it's kind of drying up. There aren't as many Argentinians playing in the biggest leagues anymore. Argentina isn't exporting as many players. And all their best players are going to MLS. So, what's up? What happened to what happened to Argentina? And the article goes into talking about how the infrastructure within Argentina is what held back these players. It's too hard to watch the teams. It's too hard to get access to the stadiums. While in the MLS, you get greeted nicely. You get your flight paid for. You get a special little seat at the top. You can see the kids. So that accessibility of MLS is why a lot of these
that's
players
key,
from South
man.
America,
That's very key.
Exactly. That's why a lot of these MLS teams are able to attract all these young Argentinians and South Americans because these guys, and even Pizarro was one of the best players when he was in Liga MX for Monterrey. And people are like, why did he go to MLS? That's a downgrade, whatever. But he did it because there are more eyes on MLS right now, and MLS is not going to keep you hostage like Liga MX does. Liga MX's biggest problem right now, and why their youth is also, the Mexican youth is kind of slowing down, is because Liga MX is demanding $40 million for their 18, 17-year-old players, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, no one's gonna pay you that, bro. And I think too another problem with their league is players get really comfortable. You're on big wages, versus in America, these younger players are they have to go as of now away from the MLS and go at 16 and 17 and try out in German teams, try out in English teams to try to get into those systems to be able to play at a very high level. Versus in Mexico, you don't really have to do that.
No, and that comes with Mexico not having salary cap.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of Americans complain about the caps here in the U.S., the financial restrictions that teams have. But those financial restrictions are what are forcing teams to produce players, to produce
That's true,
kids.
man. That's a good point.
Because the financial incentives within MLS, yes, are meant to make the teams more valuable. I was talking to the guy on this on Facebook recently. He asked me about whether they're going to add pro rel. I'm not going to go into that because it's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But one of the main reasons on why MLS has been growing so fast is because of the financial stability of the league. Because our teams don't get relegated, and investors don't have to worry about losing millions because a team gets relegated. You understand? And so, because these assets, the MLS teams are assets, just like any club team.
Yeah.
These assets are so much more safer than teams in Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, and investors are not going to be touching down there, man. Like, I mean, if you see right now, the clubs down in Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, all of them, they're struggling with Corona. In fact, Leon just got evicted from the stadium.
I saw that,
yeah. If you saw that. But MLS clubs are very stable right now. They're doing fine.
I think for the amount of years and what's with our league right now, that makes sense. I would argue that for the long term, you know.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I think I just because the league is growing, it's producing European ready talent. Viewership's growing as well. The academies are getting better and better. The teams are financially stable.
Yeah.
Right now, there's very, very, very little incentive for MLS to put pro rel. So that's why I tell people, don't get your hopes high. I don't think it's going to happen soon. But, having this system, this financial stability in place is what has led to the league to grow so fast in 25 years. To a level, I would say, the same level as Liga MX, who's had a 50-year head start on MLS.
I would agree with you. So what would be that fourth component?
And so the fourth component is have partnerships with clubs in Europe. FC Dallas is the best example. They have a partnership with Bayern Munich. Their youth players go to FC Dallas to train together. The FC Dallas players train with the Bayern youth. And it's a fantastic way to be able to engage and play with other youth players who are at a top team in the world.
Yeah.
So FC Dallas, someone who's benefiting off of this is Chris Richards, who just got his first start before the international break for Bayern Munich, who played right back. He got an assist that game. He was FC Dallas for a year. He was also his development mostly came from another club within the Texas area, but he's known for FC Dallas. And FC Dallas, basically, Bayern said, "Look, we really like this Chris Richards guy. Send him to Bayern, to our youth systems over here." So Bayern got him for pretty much nothing, but that helps Bayern because, well, they get a player for nothing that has now developed into a first-team player. He's now within the first team on every week, whether he's starting or not. Like I said, he started recently. But also it benefits FC Dallas because normally within these kind of transfers, when it comes to academy players, there's some sort of some kind of sell-on clause.
Okay.
So normally there's some sort of sell-on clause on if Bayern were to sell him, they would get some sort of percentage of that.
Yeah.
And so financially, they're going to benefit from that. But even more importantly, other people without Texas in the U.S. and the world are going to be like, wow, this guy from Dallas is killing it at Bayern. What does that say about the other Dallas players? And I think Taylor Booth is another one who just recently went to Dallas from the FC Dallas Academy, who went to Bayern from the FC Dallas Academy. And it's starting to become a cycle where now these clubs are like, okay, he's good enough for Bayern. All right. And now every single top five leagues in the world have scouts down in the MLS now. They're at every game looking because they're like, wow, this is really a legit place. Like, we can find talent here.
Plus, it makes it attractive for young players here in the U.S. too that say, hey, like, okay, if I'm looking at youth academies and FC Dallas wants me to come there, look at the partnership they have with Bayern. Let me go over there, right? I see that too. Like, yeah.
Because, at some point, back in the days of Dempsey, Bradley, when they were young, these guys are like, how am I going to get to Europe? Think about it. It was just so inaccessible to Americans. Yeah. Because the academy, no one cared about MLS at that time within the world. It was super young. The only way they could go through was collegiate level. And collegiate stuff, most people agree it's not good for soccer players to develop them. Oscar Pereja, the coach for Orlando City, actually loves the system, which is really interesting considering, he's not from here. But now players can see, wow, there's a direct line from U.S. soccer to Europe.
Yeah.
So you can go from USL to MLS to Europe. You can go from MLS Academy to the MLS first team to Europe. Or you can go MLS Academy straight into Europe.
Mm.
And so having these partnerships with these European clubs is really important as well, because you not only learn, Bayern Munich, the youth coaches there also train the youth coaches of SC Dallas. So all the secrets that Germany has in producing crazy amounts of talent, they're just feeding it to us. And it helps everyone. It's a win-win.
Amazing.
So there's nothing to lose on having a partnership with another club like that.
With all those components, the thing that I hear the most is accessibility. Accessibility.
Number one, man. That's why it's number one, man.
Yeah. Right?
It has to be accessible.
Yeah.
And that's why.
You're right. That's something that in South America is lacking more and more, in Central America, in these areas. Like what you're saying, we're making it very easy for people to come over here and take a look at our talent.
Oh, okay. You're saying accessibility in terms of the scouts, not the players getting to
accessibility in everything. Accessibility in the scouting, accessibility in players being able to talk to coaches, accessibility in, hey, people are coming to the U.S. to look at players, right? Like you said, like in other countries, because I'm more familiar with, Central and South American soccer, it's not that easy.
No, man.
Right.
And the thing is, like, you can have the best players in the world, but if nobody sees them,
yeah,
they're not going to do anything.
It doesn't matter, yeah.
It doesn't matter. And so, like I said, that's why Argentinian leagues, these other leagues in South America are struggling to get their talent overseas.
I think they're going to have a rude awakening in the next couple of years, because in the past it's more, he's an Argentinian player, let me go take a look at him, right? And I'll go through the loops. Versus now, like, the talent pool is all out there, and you're like, okay, like let me see where I can go and take a look at players. It doesn't matter their nationality as much.
Exactly. And the thing is, the Argentinian guys too are like, man, screw this league. Like, I can't go anywhere in this league. I'm going to go to MLS. And you see so many teams in MLS now have 20-year-old, 21-year-old big prospects from Argentina who came because they know that the league is financially better, and they're going to get more attention and eyes on them and have a better chance against Europe.
100%.
And that in the long term is going to make MLS way more competitive. And
it is.
And at some point, the best league in the Americas.
I think so too. I believe you. I think we're headed in that direction. So touching on all the youth academies here, USA producing some amazing players. Let's talk a little bit about the national team, man. There's a lot of excitement going on in the national team, and it's interesting because I like watching too, like what other countries, like reporters and analysts, have to say about what's going on here, especially in Mexico. Now they're like, hold on, like there's 10 or 11 USA players in the Champions League this year, and there's only 3 in Mexico. Like, what's going on? Like, hold on, let's pause for a second.
I love it.
And so one of the biggest things that I criticize, though, is that USA failed to make the World Cup in 2018. Right. And if they were playing in CONMEBOL, I could understand. But you're playing in CONCACAF, bro. Like, you and Mexico theoretically are the best teams here, So I think that kind of gives it a negative perspective in terms of Pulisic could have used that World Cup, as a learning experience. So by the time he hits 23, 24, he understands that World Cup culture more. And by the time the 2026 World Cup comes in, he's just ready-made, right? And so what do you think the U.S. has learned these last couple of years from failing to make a World Cup to the transition that I'm seeing now, where it felt like in 2018, like all this potential was going down the drain, but we're kind of picking back up again?
Yeah, I mean, it's unacceptable not to make the World Cup, and a lot of people said that it was a huge backward step for U.S. I mean, they were kind of predicting that these next 4 years are going to be some of like the worst for the U.S. in terms of talent and appearance, and whether it be fans and all that kind of every single aspect of U.S. soccer. They predicted that, but it actually turned out to be one of the most like electrifying past couple months for U.S. soccer, because all of a sudden we have these players, young guys at the top teams throughout the whole world.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, with that said, in terms of if the United States Soccer Federation has learned anything, I don't think they have. No, they haven't learned anything. That's the unfortunate part about all this, is that USSF has not learned a thing from this, because they didn't even bother to go out and interview different coaches. You just lost a World Cup. bringing in a quick fix with Bruce Arenas, a quick fix with him. And the next step you do, we just lost the World Cup. The next step you do is let's just hire this dude's little brother and not even bother to interview anyone else, which is Greg Berhalter. Now,
and how long did they take to appoint him? That's another big problem for me.
It was a year and a half.
Yeah,
for no reason.
That's way too much time.
But if don't lie to the nation that you're doing a search and it's going well when you already know your guy. Just even if a lot of people don't like Greg, at least just come out, have some balls, come out and face it to people like, hey, we're making this appointment and we're just going to start right now. Like that at least gives Greg Berhalter a year to get his system in place, get to know the people, and as well gives us, the fans, the USSF time to get a better idea of what we're going to get out of it.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, I don't think USSF has learned a thing from this whole experience because
which I think is a problem, man. Because even if we have great talent, if you don't have a coach that understands that or that can pull the best out of these players, like you're risking losing a generation. Just like England lost a generation with your Gerrards, your Scholes, your Beckhams. Exactly. Like they didn't win anything, but you know what? There was a lot of inner turmoil that a great coach could have done something about. I can think of Argentinian teams too that have had amazing teams, and I'm like, man, if they just had the right coach, like this team could be unstoppable.
Right, exactly. And so, unfortunately, like I said, USSF has not learned a thing. They're still greedy. They're still doing whatever they're doing, However, they're being carried right now. They're being absolutely carried across the finish line. Well, not the finish line, but they're getting carried by these young players coming in, who at least USSF may have not learned anything, but MLS is learning something right now. United States Youth is learning something right now. They learned that, man, we can go, and this is big thanks to Pulisic, Tyler Adams, and Alphonso Davies. These guys were absolute trailblazers for MLS in the United States national team. Alphonso Davies for MLS because it was like, wow, like the world saw there is talent in MLS that can transfer to being elite in Europe. So therefore, scouts started coming to the U.S., and therefore teams are like, oh man, we got to make some more players. We got to start producing talent because people are actually interested and it can benefit the first team and us long term. So thankfully, USSF may have not learned anything, but thankfully every single other aspect of U.S. soccer has learned something.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be too critical on Greg Berhalter just yet. While he did go he went 8-2 in competitive matches, which is, it's a good record, for any coach, but it is CONCACAF and we should be winning every game, right? So 8-2 can be misleading. However, I think I'm not going to be too hard on him. Let's just see how qualifying goes.
Yeah.
Because I don't think necessarily you need to have a world-class coach to win a World Cup. For me, the most recent is Croatia. Croatia won with a coach whose most recent job was coaching in the Saudi Arabian League, and then before that, the Croatian League.
Yeah.
But he was Croatian. I think we talked about this.
We did.
So I don't think it's necessary, but if you have a better option, go for it.
Yeah.
Right. So and the better option for me is Jesse Marsch all day.
Okay.
I'm a Jesse Marsch diehard.
That's your guy.
What makes Jesse Marsch so great too and so perfect for this team, and it's too bad we can't have him right now, is because the average age for his starting 11 is 23 years old, which is around the average age of our starting 11. If we put out the proper group out there.
That's a good point. And
so he is working with these 23-year-olds to get the most out of them within the Austrian League and Champions League, and who put up a fight against a Liverpool.
I saw that game, man. I was a little nervous, to be honest with you.
But he has the ability and has proven that he can get the most out of these young players and develop them. And then, of course, we have Holland. Holland absolutely strived in Jesse Marsch's system.
Yeah.
He completely blew up under his system, and now he's doing great at doing it. Yeah. So Jesse Marsch for me is
Minamino too. Got that transfer to Liverpool. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And also a beast. Yeah. But he's proven that he's capable of getting the most out of the young side, as well developing them better. So,
Yeah.
like I can't think of a better coach for this current generation pool that we have.
Yeah.
A bunch of young dudes
Yeah.
that aren't the primes yet, but Jesse Marshall could be great.
Which is, I think the best thing that this is going to reveal is that if this team is not succeeding or if they're struggling, like that's going to put a lot of pressure on U.S. soccer, you know? And I think that's good. Like they need that pressure. Like that's one thing that I criticize, like the American fans and the American soccer culture is in other countries in South Central America, in Europe, there's pressure on the coaches. Why? Because I guess the pressure is different because a lot of these companies, like I can think of Mexico, depends on Mexico making it to the World Cup. Depends on them being successful, right? Versus in the U.S., it's not like that because the fan base is not that large yet, but it's getting there. And so I kind of like that. Okay, let's see. You have everyone has eyes on you now because you have a lot of talent. What kind of system are you producing to make sure that this talent is flourishing not only in CONCACAF but at a World Cup level? Because I can think of that 2002 team that the U.S. had that's probably, in my opinion, the best one that they've had so far. I think this one can supersede it. But at the same time, like, you have to show it on the field, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, kind of what drove the 98, 2002 teams of the U.S. was that underdog spirit. We didn't have players as talented as Mexico. We didn't have players anywhere at those levels at that time. But we had guys who were just fighters, man. They would put their hearts out there. They put their hearts they put their bodies on the line. The U.S. has always been known as a tough team to play against, whether it's in CONCACAF internationally, like against Belgium in 2014 World Cup. We gave Belgium we gave Portugal a hard time, man. And same with Belgium when we lost to them in the quarters. But they had Portugal. It was a tie with Portugal, and then Belgium won. But Belgium had to go to overtime, and it was we gave them a fight. You know, we gave them a really good fight. We made them earn it. The recent teams of U.S. doesn't even make teams earn it. You know, we're not even tough to play against.
Yeah.
And so that kind of part of the identity is gone, but it has been replaced now with really good players, with elite players at the highest level. So,
which if you would want something, I'd rather have that. But at the same time, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't want to work.
Well, I was going to say, I would say that if the hard work was equal on both sides, but you can have talented players, but you can't teach hard work. That's a hard thing. That's not you can train someone to shoot better, pass better. You can't train that. But I do think this generation has that. I think we saw Pulisic's passion on that game. He was the only one doing anything against Trinidad and Tobago. And he was crying, melted down. Adams, McKennie, Reyna, Dest, Richards, Brooks, all these guys have fight in them. You know, they have fight.
Which I think can pull. Like, now they have this little thing on their back saying, yo, we missed the last World Cup. Let's show everybody what we're about, right?
Exactly.
Because you have a little attention now, but to me, it means nothing because I've seen different teams and different generations of soccer teams all over the world that have a lot of potential, but they never end up doing anything.
Exactly. And in fact, you know, people say, oh, it's terrible that we missed it, but I low-key think that that's the best thing that could happen to U.S. soccer was missing that World Cup.
I think so if it produces something. If nothing happens, then I'm like, okay, you just missed the World Cup.
Right. That's a great point. And of course, you know, if we made the World Cup, would we have all these great players at the best clubs? Probably, yeah. McKennie probably still be where he is. That's probably still be where he is. Pulisic will still be killing it. If anything, he'll be better. I do think that way. But what I'm saying is, I think it works to the benefit of the next generation because when that older generation didn't make it, it kind of was like, okay, now it's no excuse. Get these guys out of here. Get these old guys out of here. It's time for the new guys because now we didn't qualify for the World Cup. We got nothing to lose now. Like, there's literally not anything worse than that. And so it not only forces the youth players to Greg Berhalter and the staff there to play the young players, but also, like you said, these guys are going to have that chip on their shoulder of like, the last guys didn't make it. We gotta make it.
Yeah,
we gotta prove something.
You couldn't beat Trinidad C team? Are you joking me right now?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And so I think it's beneficial and a great thing to happen because if this happened with this current team now of the young guys, that would be devastating.
Yeah.
Going from 22 to 26 years old and missing a World Cup, that would be devastating. But it happened at a good time when this generation was kind of dying off and the new one came in.
Yeah.
So the new one now is more inspired, more determined than ever to make a World Cup because, like you said, they have this thing on their back of like, we got to do it. So that only adds even more incentive for this team to produce. So
yeah.
It could be well, like you said, we'll see, I have high hopes. But
yeah, man. What last question I want to ask you before we end this, because we could go on forever, bro.
For sure, man.
What is your expectation of the MLS and U.S. soccer in the next 5 years? What do you see?
Well, next expectation for the U.S. I'll start with the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're just going to get deeper. I mean, first things first. At first we had Pulisic was like, oh, he's our prime player. Like we got to protect him at all costs. But we're starting to get really deep at that winger position. I'm not saying as good as Pulisic, of course. But what I'm saying is that we have players competing now at every position. Dude, when the World Cup ended, the question was, we have no fullbacks. Where are fullbacks at? And now we're three players deep in each one. At the right back, we have Des, number one. Number two, we have Kenan in Portugal. And then we have these young guys within the MLS as well coming up. On the left back, we have no left back. What happened? We have Anthony Robinson. We have Kobe Hernandez at Wolfsburg. He's a monster. And the thing is, these positions are only getting deeper and deeper. And so that's the first thing that I see is that our first team, I think, is going to be the same. So our best players are still going to be there. Like, no one's going to surpass Pulisic by then. But the depth behind them is only going to get better. And with more depth creates better competition, therefore better players.
Yep, 100%.
And so for the U.S., we make the World Cup 2022. What are my expectations of 2022? I want to say that the expectations of this team, we have to keep in mind, like, these guys, this will be the first time, like, this next year is going to be the first time they're all playing together.
Yeah.
It's reality. So you really got to chill out on being critical and stuff because it is going to take time for these guys to gel. Like, the way Chelsea plays is very different than the way Adams plays at Leipzig.
Yeah.
Or McKinney plays at Juventus. These are very different,
Yeah. So I think if them qualifying to the next World Cup and making it out of the group stage is a success for that generation.
100% success. But I think they're capable even more.
Yeah.
I think that the quarterfinal game is definitely plausible. It definitely could happen for sure. It depends on who we draw, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, if we draw France, okay, fair enough. Like, we lose, that's fine, all right? But, if we get like a team that's not as, I would love to draw Mexico, man, in the quarterfinal game.
Again?
Oh, God, would I love that.
Well, you never know. Like, think about Costa Rica when they got drawn with Uruguay, with England, Italy. No one gave them anything.
They got out.
Yeah.
But yeah, my expectation is to 100% make the World Cup. I have no doubt.
Yeah.
Like, no doubt at all. I mean, even if Greg is coach, I have no doubt they're gonna make it. And then we're gonna, make get out of the group stage, get to a quarterfinals. If it's a really good team, put up a fight. If it's a team that I think is beatable, like say someone like Uruguay. Uruguay is very beatable. Then I would love for us to at least get past that quarterfinal. And so then the next year, at least 2026, semifinal, and then ideally, our guys on our prime at that time win it all. But that's the way future. As for MLS, it's kind of a similar situation to the United States national team. MLS, and they correlate. They're both tied together. They're also going to produce more and more players. We're going to see an absolute exodus of U.S. players going from MLS to Europe. And I think people are being surprised right now with how many exports are coming out of MLS, youth guys. But it's only going to, in my opinion, it's only going to be more and more every year.
Yeah. And I mean, they've been setting up the foundation, like you talked about earlier. Yeah. No one knew it or no one expected it. But like the more you talk about it and the more things I see, it makes sense, right?
No, and this is all part of the of Don Garber, the commissioner. His idea was always to make this a selling league, and he gets a lot of hate for some reason. Pro Rel is one of the biggest ones, but he has taken MLS to this point now to where clubs all over the world are paying attention to MLS,
It is, man, and I think we're doing a great job, and I want to continue to see that of mixing young talent with European players. Like, I don't think it's ideal to bring players past their prime here, but I also think that it's not bad either because I mean,
It
like,
happens everywhere.
if you told me that Higuain was coming to Charlotte FC, I would get excited and I would go to watch because it's Higuain.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Of course. No. And the thing is, MLS just called it retirement league, whatever, but there's only 4 or 5 like recognizable old Europeaners here, if not less. And the reality is that at Eredivisie, all the old Ajax guys retire in Eredivisie, but no one calls that a retirement
That's
league.
true. Van
Everyone goes back to
Persie,
Eredivisie,
Dirk Kuyt.
Wayne Rooney and Ashley Cole went to the championship to retire. Wayne Rooney didn't even retire. Wayne Rooney or Ashley Cole didn't retire in MLS. They went back to championship and retired in championship. But no one calls championship a retirement league.
It's a good point, man. I didn't think about that. You're right.
Nah, it's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous that people call it a retirement league when the average age of MLS is also younger than the Prem, it's younger than the Serie A, and it's younger than La Liga. So, like, by that logic, they're all retirement leagues.
Yeah.
It's so dumb. But most people just don't know. We're watching MLS enough to know about that, so I can't blame them. And it used to be that way for sure. For sure. But now this MLS now is not like that, and it's only going to produce more players. More players are going to be. This year was a record number of exports, right? Next year is going to be more, and then it's going to be more and more. It's going to be a very normal thing here. Yeah. It's going to be very normal.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see us becoming like a France or a Netherlands or Uruguay, these kinds of countries where like there's so much export that like that talent pool goes back into like, okay, like the Dutch league isn't necessarily the best league, but the Dutch team is stacked. The French league isn't necessarily the best league, but that French team is stacked, right?
But that's the funny thing too, because if MLS does its job right, there should be no MLS players on the first team.
Yeah,
and that's how it works, because they're normally the only, other than the exception of Ajax players, there are barely Eredivisie players on the first team in the Netherlands.
If you look at France's starting 11 for the World Cup, like, it's very hard for me to think of 2 or 3 players that were actually playing in the French league outside of like
PSG players.
Yeah.
Mbappe, Kimpembe. Yeah. No, exactly. So if MLS does its job, the thing is, that's the thing about developmental leagues is if those leagues do their job, they're not going to be an elite, and they're not going to be at the level of Prem and all those leagues. Because Prem brings in players, they buy the players.
Yeah.
So it's okay for me. That's perfectly fine that the playing level of MLS is not as high as the Prem or La Liga.
Same, man.
That's perfectly fine. Like, that's part of being a developmental league is part of this. That comes with it.
Yeah. But like what we touched on earlier, and we'll end with that, is like there has to be a plan, and like U.S. soccer has to get better at making things, knowing how to mesh the talent that we have with the coaching and the facilities and the mindset. Because I think about like Uruguay, they do a great job. They've had Washington Tavares for a long time now,
right?
And he was coaching youth teams. He knows the players, and then gems come out of there like Luis Suarez, like Cavani, like all these players. And I'm like, okay,
it's
like
a tiny country. It's a tiny country.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Like, what do they have? Less than 4 million people, and they have such a competitive team.
Exactly.
Right. So.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, awesome, man. This concludes episode 13 of the Golden Boots podcast, man. Thank you, Caleb, so much for coming on, bro. What a great discussion we just had.
Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure. This is a long time in coming. It's way better to talk like this than on Twitter.
100%.